On the edge of the moon's far side, where earthlight barely reached, sat a lonely structure of metal and silence. It had once been a military outpost, but now it was just a shelter for old memories and one man, Jacob Rourke. Once a decorated commander during the Great Orion Conflict, Jacob had chosen exile over parades, medals, or a desk job. He was a man out of time, his name forgotten by most, remembered only in classified records and old war logs buried in digital archives. The war had ended 30 years ago, but it never left him. Every night, he'd sit by the viewport, drink black tea, and stare at the stars that once lit up with explosions and fire. He never expected a visitor, but on the 7,980th day of his isolation, something changed. The sky above shimmered with a pulse of unknown energy. Then came the ship's sleek, black, and unlike any standard design. It hovered in silence before landing, on the rocky terrain outside his habitat. He watched, heart slow but alert, as its hatch opened and a single figure stepped out. She was tall, armored in a silver-blue shell that gleamed like a blade under starlight. Her eyes, glowing softly, locked onto his through the reinforced glass. Jacob didn't move. He felt it instantly. This was not a coincidence. This was planned. He stepped outside, dust crunching under his boots. The woman approached, her stride filled with confidence and precision, the way trained soldiers moved. She stopped 3 feet away. Her helmet hissed open, revealing a face that was sharp, alien, yet beautiful in a fierce kind of way. Pale violet skin, braided silver hair, and eyes that held a storm. Before Jacob could ask who she was or why she came, she spoke in a low voice, soft but strong. "My father always used to talk about you." Jacob blinked, stunned by the words. They felt like a rock thrown into still water. "Who was your father?" he asked, his voice raspier than he remembered. She paused, as if letting the silence speak first. Then she answered, "General Voss of the Zrithi Empire." Jacob's blood went cold. General Voss had been one of the deadliest minds of the war, a strategist who nearly broke the human front. Jacob had fought him in a 3-day battle near the Epsilon Ridge and tricked him into retreat. That move had turned the war. Jacob remembered Voss's eyes during their last visual exchange, cold, calculating, and full of reluctant respect. "You're his daughter," Jacob said quietly. She nodded. "And I need your help." The stars above seemed to dim as those words left her lips. The war was over. The galaxy had peace. What could possibly demand his help now? He studied her face, and something in her expression told him this wasn't politics. It wasn't revenge. It was fear. A soldier's fear, the kind you only feel when something bigger than war is coming. "Why now?" he asked. "Because something's coming," she replied. "Something only you can stop." Jacob shook his head. "I'm done with war." She took a step closer. "Then come hear what my father left behind. Hear what he said about you." The wind picked up, dust swirling like ghosts around them. Jacob hesitated. The quiet life he built here wasn't peaceful. It was just empty. Maybe it was time to listen. Maybe the war wasn't done with him yet. Without a word, he turned back toward his habitat, motioning for her to follow. Behind them the stars kept shining, but somehow they now felt much farther away. The room was quiet, the only sound a soft hum from the power core beneath the lunar outpost. Jacob Rourke stood near the edge of the small command center, arms crossed, watching General Kalira Voss as she carefully inserted a shimmering crystal chip into the holotable. The device flickered to life, casting pale blue light on their faces. A 3D recording began to play, showing an older Zrithi warrior, her father sitting in a dark room with eyes full of dread. "If you are hearing this," he said, voice steady but grim, "then the stars are no longer safe." Jacob's breath caught in his throat. This was the same man he had outwitted in battle, the same one who once vowed never to surrender to humanity. But now he looked broken not from defeat in war, but by something else. The recording continued. Voss spoke of a presence beyond the mapped sectors, a darkness moving through space without sound or trace. Worlds have gone silent, no distress calls, no wreckage, no survivors, just emptiness. The recording paused for a moment before. The older general spoke again, slower this time. "I fear this is not war as we know it. This is something older, something hidden. If my daughter finds you, Rourke, help her. You saw through me. You'll see through this." The message ended and the room fell into silence. Kalira turned to Jacob, her voice low. "My father sent scout ships. None returned. I sent one. Last group to the edge of the anchor expanse. They vanished." Jacob felt a chill crawl up his spine. The anchor expanse was quiet space. No trade, no conflict, no resources. Nothing had ever made it worth exploring, until now. He leaned over the console, thinking. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and he could feel it in his bones. "Why me?" he finally asked. "Because you're the only one who thinks like a predator," Kalira said. "The councils won't act unless they see numbers. But you know how to move before the numbers matter." Jacob stared at her. He didn't like the flattery. He didn't want to be involved. But her words stirred something inside him, the kind of instinct that had saved lives in the war. He looked away, unsure. "I've spent years trying to forget all this," he muttered. "And I've spent years preparing for it," she replied. Before he could answer, an alarm lit up. The control panel. Incoming transmission. Unauthorized signal. Jacob opened it. A garbled voice came through, distorted and panicked. "This is Patrol Ship 977. We found it no stars, no light, just silence. Static cut the voice short, then nothing." Kalira stepped forward and replayed the data packet attached. It showed video short, shaky clips of something massive drifting between stars. Not a ship, not an asteroid, a structure, black and endless. No markings, no heat. Just there, watching. Jacob studied the footage with narrowed eyes. "How old is this?" he asked. 6 hours, Kalira said. "They sent it before they disappeared." Jacob turned toward the weapons locker and opened it. Dust rose off equipment he hadn't touched in years. His hand hovered over a compact plasma rifle. "We leave tonight," he said. Kalira gave a single nod. As they prepared, Jacob wondered who would even believe them if they returned. He didn't care. This wasn't about politics anymore. This was about survival. And he had a sinking feeling that no one, not even the Zeti or the human colonies, truly understood what was coming. He boarded her ship, cold steel under his. Boots, The interior was alien but efficient. Lights glowed dimly, casting long shadows. As the engines hummed to life, Jacob looked back one last time at his lunar outpost. It had been his cage, but also his shelter. Now it was just a shell. The ship lifted off, silent against the stars. Kalira plotted a course toward the anchor expanse. "Once we cross the border, we'll be alone," she said. "No signals, no backup. Just us." Jacob gave a dry laugh. Just like old times. The ship jumped into light speed, stars stretching into lines. Jacob sat back and closed his eyes. He wasn't sure what they were flying into, but he knew it wasn't a war in the usual sense. This was something else, something hiding beneath the flags and peace treaties of the galaxy, something ancient, something patient. And it was waking up. The ship emerged from light speed with a jolt, dropping into the orbit of a shattered planet, whose surface glowed faintly like burning coal. Jacob Rourke stood beside General Kalira Voss, staring at the ruins below. This had once been a thriving colony, home to hundreds of thousands from the Varelian race, now reduced to ashes and black stone. No distress signal, no signs of battle, just total silence. As Kalira scanned the wreckage for data, Jacob noticed the strange pattern in the destruction, no random blasts or scatterings, but clean, precise devastation, as if the attackers wanted to remove all trace of life without waste. A cold feeling spread through his chest. This wasn't a war of conquest. It was something worse. Kalira's ship was already pinging for permission to enter triumvirate space, seeking a meeting with the Galactic Council on Verad Prime. Jacob didn't like councils. They talked too much and acted too late. But this time he hoped he was wrong. When they landed on Verad Prime, they were met not with curiosity, but with suspicion. Armed guards escorted them to the lower chambers deep underground, where politics and secrets were exchanged behind closed doors. The council was made of 11 members, each from a major species, and not one of them looked pleased. Jacob stood silently as Kalira presented the data footage of the disappearing patrols, the black structure drifting through space, and the complete annihilation of 3 colonies, including the one they had just seen. She spoke with control, but even her voice shook when she described what her scouts had encountered before going dark. But instead of urgency, the council responded with cold stares and diplomatic delay. The Yaltree representative folded his many arms and said, "These events are tragic but isolated. Perhaps internal accidents, civil wars." Jacob stepped forward. Accidents don't erase cities without a sound. Civil wars don't leave no bodies. The Zornian delegate leaned forward, blinking slowly. "You were a soldier once, weren't you? Maybe you're seeing war where there is none." Jacob clenched his fists. He wanted to shout, to demand action, but Kalira placed a hand on his arm and nodded subtly. He stepped back. Then Kalira played the last message from her father, the one naming Jacob and warning of the coming darkness. The room fell silent for a moment, but the silence quickly broke with quiet scoffing and excuses. "An old soldier's ghost stories," one muttered. "The Zrithi are using fear to rally allies," said another. "Human manipulation," sneered the third. The session ended without a vote, without support. They were dismissed politely, pushed aside like myths from another age. As they walked through the stone corridors of the council building, Jacob felt the weight of failure pressed down on him. "They won't move," he said. Kalira nodded. "They never do, not until it's at their gates." But the worst was yet to come. That night, as they prepared to leave the planet, an explosion rocked the docking bay. Kalira's ship was thrown into flames, and chaos filled the air. Sirens screamed, and guards ran everywhere. Jacob pulled Kalira behind cover as smoke filled the air. Someone had planted charges deliberately. This wasn't an accident. They were being silenced. From the smoke came figures masked, armed, and fast. They weren't guards. They were assassins. Jacob reacted like the soldier he once was, grabbing a dropped weapon and opening fire. Kalira fought beside him, blades spinning, her armor flickering with defense fields. Together they pushed through the attackers, escaping into the lower tunnels of the council city. Once they were clear, Kalira called for a hidden extraction ship she had kept in reserve, a personal fail-safe from her days as a general. They flew away from Verad Prime in silence, the stars cold around them. Later, as they drifted in the safety of deep space, Jacob stared at the message left by the council, a diplomatic notice, stating they were now under review for inciting unrest. He laughed bitterly. "They're more afraid of panic than extinction." Kalira sat beside him, face calm but voice like steel. "The alliance is breaking. Fear does that. So what now?" Jacob asked. She looked him in the eye. "We find those who will listen, those who remember what humanity is capable. We don't need all of them. We just need enough." Jacob leaned back, remembering the faces of old allies, enemies who once respected him, commanders who still owed him favors. If the council wouldn't act, then they would build something else. Not a formal army, not an empire, a spark, a warning, a resistance built on truth. The ship jumped into deep space once more, and Jacob felt the chill of old instincts returning. The alliance may be broken, but humans had always been at their best when they had to fight alone, and this time they wouldn't be alone for long. The stars outside blinked slowly as the ship moved through deep space, quiet and unseen, like a shadow passing through the dark. Jacob Rourke sat in the command chair of the hidden vessel Kalira had called the Wraith, his fingers tapping against metal as he stared at the map glowing on the screen. Their destination was an old Earth colony called Bastion 3, a frozen planet once used as a covert training ground for elite human operatives during the Orion War. It had long since been abandoned. At least, that was what the records claimed, but Jacob knew better. If anyone could help them now, it would be the ghosts who still lived there, men and women who followed no banner, no council, only the ancient code passed down through generations of human warriors. The human code: protect the innocent, defend the frontier, answer when the dark calls. As the ship approached Bastion 3's orbit, thick clouds of ice crystals shimmered in the atmosphere, hiding the surface beneath. No beacons, no signals, just a deep silence. Kalira scanned for heat signatures and found faint patterns buried underground. "They're there," she said, "but they don't want to be found." Jacob smiled faintly. "That's how you—" "No, it's them." They landed in a deep valley where snow covered metal hatches long lost to time. Jacob stepped out first, crunching across the frost with slow, steady steps. He removed his glove and pressed his palm against an old scanner hidden beneath a rusted panel. A soft click sounded. Then the ground shook. A circular door opened beneath them, revealing a tunnel lit by blue emergency lights. "Let me talk," Jacob said, and Kalira nodded without argument. As they moved deeper, shadows followed them, quiet steps in the dark. Then came the voice, low and sharp, echoing from all directions. "State your name and your purpose." Jacob paused and looked up. "Commander Jacob Rourke, ID Alpha 47. The dark is moving again. I need to speak to whoever still remembers the code." Silence answered him for a moment. Then the lights flared brighter, and figures stepped out of the walls, men and women in faded combat gear, their faces aged but alert. One stepped forward. She had one eye, a scar across her jaw, and a long rifle slung across her back. "Rourke," she said, her voice filled with surprise and distrust. "We thought you were dead." "I was," he said, "but the galaxy's waking up, and we're not ready." She studied him for a long moment before giving a short nod. "Come in. But if you're lying, you'll never leave this place." They led Jacob and Kalira into the heart of Bastion 3, a city hidden beneath the ice, powered by old nuclear cores and guarded by machines older than most council ships. The people here lived by discipline and silence, trained every day, watched the stars every night. Jacob stood before their council, a ring of old warriors who had once shaped the fate of battles, but now stood forgotten. He told them everything: the black structure in space, the missing colonies, the cowardice of the council, the assassination attempt on Verad Prime. At first, they listened in silence. Then they asked questions, sharp and direct, testing every part of his story. When it was done, the oldest of them leaned forward and asked one question. "Why come here?" Jacob looked them in the eye. "Because you're the last line. You always were. If this thing reaches Earth, if it swallows the colonies, they'll call for you. I'm calling now, before it's too late." There was a pause. Then the woman with one eye stepped forward. "You want a war, Rourke?" "No," he said. "I want a chance to stop one." She nodded slowly. "Then you'll need the beacon." Kalira frowned. "What's the beacon?" The woman smiled. "The last warning system built during the war. A signal strong enough to reach every human outpost, every survivor, every hidden cell. We buried it after the peace treaty. If we light it now, there's no turning back." Jacob stepped forward. "Light it." That night, deep in the mountain, they powered up the beacon. It was a tower of old steel and energy cores, wrapped in human code and war memories. Kalira watched as Jacob placed his hand on the control plate. A bright pulse shot into space, carrying a message across the stars. "The dark returns. This is Commander Rourke. Come home." The message repeated every hour, broadcasting to the forgotten. Across distant moons, on broken ships, inside refugee colonies, old soldiers heard it. Some whispered, some wept, some stood in silence and reached for weapons they had not touched in years. Back on Bastion 3, the signal tower hummed steadily. Jacob sat alone in the cold control room, looking out into the void. "They'll come," he said softly. Kalira stepped beside him. "And if they don't?" Jacob didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because if no one came, then he would still fight. That was the code. And that was what made humans dangerous, not their numbers, not their weapons, but the fire they carried when the lights went out. The ice winds howled across the broken surface of Bastion 3, but beneath the frozen crust, deep in the hidden steel, chambers of the last human fortress, warmth spread from the old nuclear cores that powered the beacon, and the air carried a different kind of energy anticipation. Jacob Orcs stood at the center of the underground command hall, staring at the holographic map now lit with dozens of new signals. His message had been heard. Small ships, lone carriers, stealth units, and even civilian freighters modified for battle were now drifting toward Bastion 3 from across the far reaches of space. From forgotten colonies, lost war zones, and ruined border worlds came responses. Simple and grim, received, en route, for Earth. Kalira Voss stood beside him, arms crossed, watching as old veterans and young warriors gathered in the halls, cleaning weapons, repairing armor, preparing for a war that hadn't yet been declared. Each of them had come not because of orders or politics, but because the voice they heard in the beacon's call reminded them of the fire they once held. Jacob's voice, the voice of Earth's last commander. But now they needed more than fervent, a message. They needed direction, unity, belief. And that meant words, words that struck like metal, words that lived like memory. Kalira turned to him and said softly, "They're waiting." Jacob nodded, his face hard but his eyes thoughtful. They walked together to the speech platform at the core of the fortress, where thousands had gathered, some standing in silence, others sharpening blades, many still covered in the dust of long journeys. The platform lit up as he stepped onto it, and the lights dimmed around him. A hush fell. No music played, no anthem rose. Just silence, and then Jacob spoke. His voice was calm, low, and carried through the steel corridors like thunder, waiting to strike. "I don't know your names. I don't know where you fought or what you lost. I don't know how many scars you carry or what ghosts follow you. But I know this. We all heard the same sound. Silence. Silence where voices used to be. Silence where cities used to shine. And silence means one thing in the dark, something worse is coming." He paused, letting the quiet settle over them again. "The councils won't speak of it. The peace lords say it's fear. They'd rather fall quietly than raise an alarm. But we are not quiet. We are not made for fading away. We are made of iron, of flame, of will. We are human, and we do not wait for death. Faces lifted, hands clenched, eyes widened. We were not built in peace. We were built in war, in storms, in loss. Every colony, every ship, every wall was born from struggle. And now, when the galaxy needs a voice, we will give them not soft words, but iron. Iron in our speech, iron in our hands, iron in our hearts." His hand rose toward the hologram, showing the drifting black structure in space, the unknown presence that had swallowed entire systems. "Whatever this thing is, it doesn't want land or gold. It doesn't speak. It just takes. It removes. It consumes. It is silence. So we will answer it with noise, with resistance, with fire." A low rumble spread through the hall as those gathered began to murmur, nod, and shift. "They say we are the past, that humans once ruled the war, but no longer. But I tell you, humans are not the past. We are the warning. We are the last word spoken before the dark." Kalira watched him closely, her face unreadable, but her eyes blazing. If you came here hoping to hide, Jacob continued, go. If you came here hoping someone else would fight for you, go. But if you came here because you believe the stars still belong to the living, then stand with me. Not as soldiers, as defenders of Earth, of each other, of all that still breathes in this galaxy. Then he finished with one sentence, quiet and cold. The darkness has no flag, but we do. The hall exploded in noise, not cheering, but a storm of boots, stomping, hands, slamming metal, voices rising not in chant, but in agreement. It was not joy, it was not glory, it was readiness. The kind of sound that came before a war no one wanted, but everyone understood. Jacob stepped down from the platform, and Kalira met him. That was not a speech, she said. That was a weapon. Good, Jacob replied. We'll need weapons. They moved quickly after that. The volunteers were divided into crews, cells, and units, each given a task. Some would protect the beacon, others would build forward posts, and many would head out to scout the path toward the anomaly. Kalira took command of a strike fleet, while Jacob remained at Bastion 3 to coordinate the growing force. And then, late that night, a signal came short, simple, terrifying. A scout ship had gone missing near the edge of Sector Black 9, the closest known approach to the structure. No explosion, no wreckage, just a final message. We see the stars shifting. They are wrong. They're moving around it. Then nothing. Jacob stared at the screen, jaw tight. Kalira, summoned back to the control room, read the same message and whispered, the stars are bending around it. It's not just big, Jacob said. It's bending space. It's not a weapon. It's a hole. They looked at each other, not with fear, but understanding. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just here to conquer. It was something older, something that fed not on blood, but on existence. The speech of iron had been spoken. Now the silence would answer, and the war, the real war, was about to begin. Blackness and space had changed, like a quiet breath before a storm, as if the galaxy itself knew something had awakened. And aboard Bastion 3, Jacob Rourke stood at the command table, watching the last images from the scouts that had vanished near the edge of Sector Black 9, where the stars bent like ripples in water, where light itself was pulled into silence. And Kalira stood beside him, her silver armor scratched from. The last mission, but her voice steady, as she reported that more signals were going dark, small freighters, old listening posts, even a few patrol ships that had ignored the warnings, and all of them were just gone, not destroyed, not broken, simply erased, and no one knew how or why. Only that the black shape that waited in the cold void was growing, not like a ship or a weapon, but like a shadow stretching across. Memory, and still the humans came, answering the beacon, not with fear, but with resolve. Pilots from asteroid belts, engineers from shattered moons, war orphans from the red sands of Mars, all of them drawn to the old code, to the promise that even in silence they would speak. And now the armada waited, scattered like sparks across the stars, ready for a war no one understood. And it was then that a message came, not from the enemy, but from a place long thought gone, a human research base buried beneath the dust of Helion 7, where scientists had once studied dark matter anomalies before the funding stopped. And the signal was faint, broken, but urgent. We saw it first. It's not alive, dead. It's a memory, a machine built to erase time. It doesn't hate us, ... It doesn't even see us, ... But it's coming. And the last word was swallowed by static as Kalira turned to Jacob and said, "It's older than war." And he nodded because deep inside he had known it from the beginning, that whatever waited out there wasn't just a threat to Earth. It was a wound, a scar left by something ancient, maybe even by humans themselves. Long before the first colony ship ever left the Sol system, and as the commanders gathered around the war table, voices rose, some demanding action, others wanting to flee. But Jacob raised one hand and they all fell silent, and he said, "If we are to end, we end standing, not fading." And he gave the order to move, to light up the skies not with panic, but with presence. And the fleet rose, hundreds of ships, old and new, patched and perfect, with names like Endurance and Remnant, and Memory of Dawn. And each one carried not just weapons, but stories, and Jacob led them in silence, his ship at the center, Kalira at his side, her eyes focused, her hand resting on the hilt of her father's old blade. And as they neared the event horizon of the structure, the stars vanished one by one, and the universe felt smaller, like standing at the edge of a vast scream. And then it happened, not a beam, not a strike, but a ripple that passed through space itself, a wave of nothing, erasing all it touched, and one of the lead ships vanished before it could even fire. But the others held the line, not because they had better shields, but because they had each other. And Jacob gave the order to fire, and fire they did, missiles and plasma and pulse rounds striking the shadow. And though it did not react, though it did not break or cry or burn, the act of resistance itself changed something, as if the machine, the memory, the ancient silence noticed them for the first time. And in that moment, Kalira whispered, "It's looking." And a strange light filled the void, not bright, not warm, but deep, like thought made visible. And in that light they saw shapes, not ships, not machines, but fragments of things that might have been civilizations long gone, languages unspoken for 1,000,000 years. And then the light turned cold again, and the shadow struck back, not with weapons, but with pressure, with time unraveling, with systems going backward, with air freezing, and people forgetting why they were there. And still the humans held the line, because they remembered the speech, the code, the fire, and one by one they fought, not for victory, but to be remembered, to leave a mark. And when Jacob's ship began to break apart, he turned to Kalira and said, "Tell them we were never weak." And she nodded, tears in her eyes, and took the escape pod just before the command deck shattered, and she screamed into the comms, into every signal that still worked, "He stood, and so will we." And the fleets heard her, and from the dark came a new sound, not metal, not machine, but human voices, singing, shouting, roaring across the stars. And the shadow slowed, just for a moment, as if confused. And in that moment, Kalira activated the final protocol hidden in the Bishan, a memory bomb, not to destroy, but to imprint, to flood the enemy with what it could not understand: human love, rage, hope, music, sacrifice, stories. And the shadow convulsed, twisted, cracked, not from pain, but from understanding, because maybe it had never known life could be so loud. And then light burst across the black, and the stars returned one by one, and the silence was broken. And though Jacob was gone and many ships were lost, the others returned not in defeat, but in survival, in victory of the spirit. And when the story was told across the colonies, they did not speak of strategy or tactics, but of a speech made of iron, and a man who stood without fear, and a whisper that passed from Kalira's lips to every world. We were never weak. We were human.